Hey, welcome to Life, Liberty, and Truth podcast with your hosts Christian and Jared.
Hey.
Jared, say hello.
What's up?
So thank you for tuning in. We hope you liked our last video. It was just a quick introduction of things that we're going to be covering. Today's topic is going to be a good one. Definitely very close to mine and Jared's hearts, being athletes. And so we hope you like it. If there's a topic that you'd like us to cover, contact us on social media, comment, DM, however you want to do. Find us on social media platforms, comment on YouTube, all the good stuff. So, Jared, you want to introduce today's topic?
Yeah, so the topic for today is going to be politics and sports, and if, where the boundaries are, where the boundaries of politics should be in sports and where they should remain.
So, one of the things that obviously that we kind of think of is freedom of speech. Everybody has a right to freedom of speech. But at what point, as an athlete, is that too far? You know what I mean? So, what are your opinions on that?
So, I think, you obviously want to be professional on the field,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so I think as an athlete, you can, have your stance and state your stance on certain politics, but I wouldn't, physically, pronounce those, political stances that you may have on, a wider spectrum.
Well, here's my thing with it. I don't care if you go on to Twitter and you tweet your opinion on something, you say who you're going to vote for, all that kind of stuff, but sports, professional sports, it's a job.
Right.
If you're going in your job and you're going and announcing who you're voting for, who you like, policies you don't like, insulting people in your job, no one's gonna stand for that.
Right.
And I think especially in pro sports, these guys just get away with whatever they want. And so I understand freedom of speech to an extent. But there's a point where in your job that you are getting paid to do a job.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you're not doing that job, and some people become I don't know exactly what the word would be, but they just their politics seem to come over their job.
Correct.
Or their sport or whatever they do. And so as a fan, it's hard for me to go and like a player when they're just shooting their mouth off about something over and over again, especially because sports are a disconnect from, I don't want to say reality, but for some people it's a disconnect completely from reality. It's a time to go and get home from after you're done working, to get away from politics, to de-stress. And then you go and you're watching all these sports and they just talk about more politics. And it's okay, at what point is enough and too much?
Right. So I think, sports are it's entertainment, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're trying to entertain the public. And in order to do that, you don't want politics in there because that's going to just, people just don't want to listen to it. They may have their opinions on it, but at the end of the day, they just want to watch football or they want to watch basketball, right?
Yeah,
and just enjoy the sport, watching with their family without having to, deal with the political issues in the world,
Exactly. So, let's talk about Colin Kaepernick and kneeling for the flag. So, this isn't primarily really a sports issue, but kneeling for the flag did start in sports with Kaepernick.
Right.
So, tell me your thoughts on it.
Well, so it had to do with racial inequality, right? Was
Mm-hmm.
the reason why Kaepernick, knelt for the flag. And it's one thing, and I understand that protest, right? Because he was frustrated with what was happening in America, and he believed that there is a racial inequality, right?
Mm-hmm.
Towards people of his color. And he wanted to take, he wanted people to know his stance on it. And obviously, since he has freedom of speech to do that, and as an American, you also have the ability to protest. I don't have a problem with protesting outside of, the game of football. But however, I believe that at the end of the day, you should, respect the flag, even if you disagree with, America and its politics at that time. I think just standing for the flag and being a proud American is what it's about, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think him kneeling kind of signified that he didn't really respect America, right? And I think as Americans, we should all respect where we are, especially, you're taught to respect your home where you live, right? So it's the same thing. You want to respect your country, and you want to respect the people within it.
Well, there's two things that kind of come up to me. So when I was listening to that old Johnny Cash song, that Rugged Old Flag, and he talks about that flag that was shot during Civil War, it was carried through Iwo Jima type stuff. Like, you're not, the big argument people make is, it's disrespectful to the military, but it goes like so much beyond that. It's disrespectful to military, it's disrespectful to our past, it's disrespectful to freedom in general, because the American flag isn't just a flag. I mean, you have the Hong Kong protesters that wave the flag because it represents freedom and equality, the most amount of equality, in the entire world right now. I mean, you can go and protest, that black people are treated not as good as other people in the country, specifically white people. But coming from a black person who makes millions of dollars a year and has a sponsorship by Nike to come and do this,
right,
it's a little different. You're not just kneeling for racial inequality. You're kneeling for the troops, the disrespect for the troops that went and died on D-Day and got slaughtered. And the people
before that,
Yeah, and every war that's between that. You're disrespecting the black army men that fought in the Civil War for their own freedom. You're not just disrespecting white people or disrespecting a country or an ideology. You're disrespecting history and all kinds of things. And so that's kind of my thing on it. It's very difficult for me to understand because, we're talking about the country that like, I believe U.S. was the second one to make slavery illegal. We're talking about the first one to pull out of the slave trade.
Right.
And just because there are past inequalities does not mean that you can go and disrespect it now.
Right.
And another thing that I was kind of thinking about is someone made a comment about, isn't kneeling to the flag just a different form of respect or a different way? And because, people would kneel to kings, like that was a sign of submission, respect. My thing on that too is that, okay, so when we kneel to someone or something, it means we're under it, we're beneath it, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're subject to that thing. I think the amazing thing about the American flag is that it shows that we stand for it and we kneel to no man. There's no man, no person in America that we need to kneel to. We don't even kneel to the country. We stand and we put our hand over our hearts and respect, because we respect and love the country, but we're not submitted to it. We're not under it. Part of the kneeling part too is just it's just the way people interpret things, right?
Right.
It's just different. So kneeling for the flag might not be disrespectful in some places, but here culturally it definitely is.
Yeah. You got to think about another thing that the flag represents unity, right?
Yeah.
What do you think the stars represent? They represent the states. How, we've all come together and, right? So as everyone stands and the crowd, for the national anthem or for when the flag is presented, right? The colors, it's a sign of unity. And when people kneel to it, it causes division.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the last thing that's the complete opposite of what America is about. America is about unity, about freedom and hope, right? And so when people kneel to that, it's almost like they denied it, right? When it's not. You know, there may be certain issues, right, that people don't like, but at the end of the day, you know, we're all here, you know, proud Americans, and everyone that lives in America should be proud to stand for the flag.
And, you know, people have the freedom to not be proud if they choose to. They have the freedom to not stand for the flag if they choose to. My problem with the Kaepernick thing isn't that, I mean, not disrespect, but I don't support his decision, but I think he has the right to do it. I think anyone has the right to kneel. I think anyone has the right to not stand, even in a game. I might not agree with it, but you have the right to do it.
Right.
I mean, and that's what's so great, I think, about this country is that you can literally kneel for something and have no repercussions for it and make millions off of something in disrespecting the very place that you live in, the very place and markets and system that allows you to make millions for literally kneeling.
And be successful.
And be successful, yeah. And
so.
I think, I don't know, it's very hard for me to get behind that. And like I said, you can do what you want, but it doesn't mean I'm going to agree with it.
Another thing, real quick, I want to bring up. So, I mean, it kind of has some similarity to it, but you remember Tim Tebow?
Mm-hmm.
Like, he would kneel in the end zone, right, when he scored. And this is different because he would kneel, you know, for God, right? For praise for God. People, you know, ridiculed him for that, right? People didn't like that he kneeled.
Well, was that during the flag? I don't remember. That wasn't during the national anthem.
Flag,
that was pregame, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was pregame, but he would do it like if he scored a touchdown, you know, in the game, he would kneel. And so, as respect to, you know, God, right? And praise. So, I just think it's odd that you're gonna, I know it's kind of a little bit of a different thing, but it's similar because it has the kneeling aspect in it, right? Even though it's a different, you know, thing they were kneeling to, or a person, right?
Or reason,
right?
Yeah.
And so I think it's just really odd that people ridiculed him for kneeling, right? And now that it's a political thing, they don't say anything about it.
Yeah, and one thing that I'm glad he did was when he first started doing it, he was starting to sit on a bench. I'm very glad that he didn't continue to do that, because to me, that is so much more disrespectful than kneeling. Because at least kneeling, you are showing that kind of submission. And it's like a halfway point, I guess. But that's one of the things that also makes it hard, is because now you're looking up to a person who was sitting on the bench, who wasn't even kneeling. He was just sitting on the bench, didn't care, drinking water during the national anthem.
Right.
And now that person was like, oh, well, I went and talked to law enforcement. Or no, it was a military, someone from the military. And they decided that kneeling was better. And yeah, I agree kneeling was better, but the only reason you're kneeling was because the bench was like too harsh. You were willing to sit on that bench until you got crap for it. And then you decided to revise it a little bit.
Right.
And to me, like, that revision is just you kind of trying to find a
middle ground.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And exactly. So I have a hard time with that. You know, and I'll say it again. I said it a bunch already. You had the right to do it.
100%.
I don't disagree with the fact that you have the right to do it. And I don't think you should do it. That's not, I don't think that. But if you think you should, you have the right to do it. So, you want to talk about LeBron a little bit and the NBA and the China stuff going on? That's an interesting one.
Wild.
So, my deal with LeBron is, how is he able to go and tweet about all this kind of stuff? And, you know, I don't really have a problem with people on Twitter, same kind of thing, like,
freedom of speech.
That's your freedom of speech, yeah. That's you had that right to go and say, like, whatever, what you want to do on Twitter. But whenever you're in your locker room and you're trashing politicians and all that kind of stuff, that's not your place.
Right.
Whenever you're on any kind of sports channel, it's sports. Mm-hmm. Politics and sports, they don't go together. There's a reason people watch sports. People watch sports, they don't have to watch politics.
Right.
And so one of the big things for me too is how many people look up to LeBron? How many little kids are going to look at what he says and they're going to believe, they're going to take for word everything that he says and not even question it because that's LeBron James. And so when you're going and you're doing it on these platforms like this where kids are watching and it shouldn't be allowed. Because like watching the Last Dance with Michael Jordan, and he said he wouldn't endorse anybody. I respect that because same thing. People look up to him. People will follow them blindly and have no ideas of their own. And so by not saying anything at all, or by kind of keeping it more private, you're encouraging people to think for themselves. You're encouraging people to go and find ideas that they like. You're encouraging people to go have their own voices. And when you go out and you're on these televisions and all this kind of stuff and you're just going and blasting people, calling them names, like you can't call Trump a racist in front of a kid if he respects you and not be like, oh yeah, that kid's definitely going to think he's a racist. Like, there's no doubt.
You got to remember that these people, and it's not just LeBron James, it's not just Colin Kaepernick, it's, Tiger Woods. You have all these people in these separate sports, right, that have a huge influence on especially the youth. And the last thing you want to do is send them a false idea of what America is, because that's the issue is, what's being said by these people that have these platforms, right, and this influence on the public, is they almost constantly just trash America and everything that it's about. And I understand that it's off the field that they say this. That's one thing. Even though I don't agree with some of the things they say, they have that right. But as soon as you come onto the court, as soon as you come onto the field, wherever, play your game. Play your game. You're being paid millions of dollars to play a game.
Yeah.
And politics is the last thing that needs to be in sports, in my opinion. You don't need these political issues floating around in the sports realm. Well,
like I said too, it's a job.
Right.
I wouldn't go and I wouldn't talk crap about Joe Biden just for over and over again in my job in front of everybody and not expect something to happen. I wouldn't go and argue all these things. You're supposed to be a professional for a reason. Professional means more than one thing. To be a professional, it's not just getting paid to do something. You have to dress the part, you have to look the part, you have to act the part. Professional to me is not just a professional athlete. It's being respectful, it's treating people kindly, it's making your money. And so by doing all this stuff, you're not being a professional, and people don't pay you to hear your opinion.
Right.
And so by just saying these, you're causing divide. You're causing divide on things that people shouldn't be dividing over. People should, of all ethnicities, of all religions, of all places, should come together for this sport, and they should have a mutual agreement and a mutual love for that one thing. Even if their politics are different, even if their race is different, even if their gender is different, but they can come together and unite over these things. They can come together at the sport as a whole. We can all be basketball fans, and no one would ever care about any kind of issue. Mm-hmm. But by doing this, you're going to cause more divide.
Right.
You're going to start causing race issues. You're going to start causing political issues, religious issues. And so I don't think that should be tolerated.
More division. Right?
Yeah.
So
What are your thoughts on the MLB and all the Black Lives Matter stuff? Kind of very similar to kind of the same things we were just talking about.
Yeah, I mean, it's odd that, the NBA, the MLB and everything, it's one thing if they're going to support the organization, but it's one thing, it almost feels like a push, an influence, a in-your-face type thing. Why you're just shoving it in everyone's faces and just not just talking about it on the side.
Yeah.
Right? Again, this has to do with politics. And they're putting politics right on the fields, right on the courts. And everyone's just going along with it like it's nothing.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, and the fact that everybody's wearing the Black Lives Matter shirts,
Yeah.
And I don't know that much about it as far as like if it's forced. I don't think they're forcing anybody to wear them. But it's like you have to feel tremendous pressure to not if you're not wearing one. And one of the things that they did on opening day was that they held the black, I don't know, what is a rope? Or it was like a curtain almost. It was some kind of fabric.
Yeah.
Well, each team sat on their side and they held their own, and it was all black. And it was a moment of silence. So one thing that I am glad they did was they had the moment of silence instead of doing it during the national anthem, because if they all kneeled during the national anthem and held that, whatever the fabric was, that would have been much worse. But the moment of silence is very different. I don't know if I would have necessarily participated, but I can see why someone who might not agree with everything that's happening would still do it.
Right.
But again, I feel like it's forced. Like, why are we doing this? You want to heal racial divide, and yet you're going and kneeling for only black people. I mean, there's white people too that have grown up in poverty or have grown up in oppression of some kind. And, I mean, I don't want to get too far into, like, the politics side because this is politics in sports.
Right.
But when you bring politics into sports, then it's not really sports anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And so I feel like it's really forced.
So what do you think about them changing the Washington Redskins name?
What
They changed it to just the
It's just the Washington football team, I think, right now.
So, all right.
Okay.
I want you to talk about that.
So that makes me really heated for a couple of reasons. Number one, when you name a football team, or any sports team in general, you don't name a team that is like a wimpy name. You name a team after something that's great, after something that strikes fear into the other team when they hear that you're playing, something that's just straight out, like, awesome, right? The Redskins, like, that's a cool name. Their logo, that's awesome. I mean, what are Redskins? They're Native Americans. Native Americans strike fear in people's hearts. They're warriors. That's why they're great. They go out and they fight. They compete. That's what they're named after. You can't just erase people's identities. What are you going to name it to? Something that doesn't involve Native Americans at all. So now you're representing Native Americans, and it's bringing awareness to that kind of thing. And if you're that offended by it, then make the culture aware of them. Don't cause more divide. You're going to replace it's diversity.
And also, you play. Let's say you play for the Redskins. And you're proud because when you go on a team, that's your team. Yeah. You're proud of being on the Redskins because that's your label.
Well, right? It represents an entire culture.
You represent.
It represents an entire culture. Right. It's not just he's an Indian or Native American. No, it represents an entire culture, a culture of warriors who fight and dominate. That's what you're named after. A jet, like the Jets. Like, that's a cool name. There's cooler names, not gonna lie. But a jet. What do you think of when you think of a jet? Like fighter jets, fighter pilots, victory, war, that kind of stuff. Sports in its own way is a war. You're fighting another team to dominate them and destroy them at any cost.
Right.
That's what competition is. War is competition. Sports is competition. That's why you go and you get these awesome names like the Redskins.
Another thing too, you got the fans, right?
Yeah.
Those fans, they support this team. And not only you as a player, right? You represent yourselves, you represent your team, you represent your fans, your fan base, everything that has to do with your team, you support, right? And They support you. And, I mean, if they changed the name over something else, it wouldn't be that big of a deal. But since there's so much racial tension right now, and they just decide to change it to just the national football team. Is it the football team?
It's Washington football team, I think.
So, are they just gonna come up with a name before the season starts?
No, they're gonna. I think what they said they're gonna do is they're gonna play the season with Washington, and then they're gonna change it at the end. If I remember right, I could be wrong about that.
It's definitely a controversial topic, and because I just think it's weird because growing up, right, watching football, watching sports, when you change these names, it's not just, I mean, a lot of people, they take sports like personally, because they play sports, even if they don't play it, but if they're an athlete, they appreciate the sport. And when you grow up watching it, it's almost like when you change it to a completely different name because of something so ridiculous, it's almost just kind of a slap to the face, against your childhood, taking that part of it away, even if you necessarily didn't really give it a thought about it, right?
Yeah.
But it was one thing in your childhood that's now kind of changed because of something.
And I feel like by erasing the name, like I said, you can link it to your culture. By erasing the name, aren't you essentially erasing that culture? You don't want that culture to be known or to be put out there. You don't want that people to be represented. And by taking that away, you're just taking away the diversity of the whole situation.
There's history behind each sports team's name.
Yes.
Every team.
There's generally a positive history behind it. I don't know a team with a negative history.
I can't really think of one. I mean, other than the Yankees, but I mean that wasn't.
That's not.
That was something that
was intended for a derogatory purpose that people are now proud of.
Right. Yeah.
People. I've never been called a Yankee. I don't think I ever will be called a Yankee. Not a lot of people call me Yankee, but that's something I'm proud of. To be an American, it's like someone calling me an American. That's something you're proud of. Like the kind of screw you mentality of you went in derogatory. Well, I'm gonna take it as a compliment. Kind of like what redneck used to mean. Redneck was originally a derogatory term, and it still is in many ways a derogatory term.
Yeah.
But what do people now that are actually rednecks do? They're proud of it.
Yeah.
They brag about it. They show it off to the whole world. We are rednecks.
And they go mudding.
Yeah, and then they go do redneck stuff, and they have fun with it.
So, one
of the last things I'm going to bring up is the gay pride, LGBTQ days, those kind of things in sports. Now, keep in mind too, they do have religious days too.
Right.
They have faith and family night.
Yeah.
But it's not really the same. Let's be honest. So, what are your opinions on that?
So I think even if you don't agree with it, I think in that aspect they're trying to incorporate all cultures, right, as a unity, right? You may not have to agree with it, you may agree with it, right? But it's one of those things that, right, sports, no matter your creed or ethnicity or whatever, your background, it's about being together, enjoying a game and having a common ground, right?
Well,
in some aspect.
What's funny about that one is if we're taking out the Redskins, because it's not, whether it's a misrepresentation or it's not inclusive or it's racist, if you don't have a day for literally every person, wouldn't it be racist to freaking celebrate that stuff? If you have a gay pride day or a month, but you don't go and you don't have a straight pride day, well, that's not inclusive. So if we're going to go and talk about canceling everything that's not all inclusive and not equal, then why are we still having all this stuff? Because faith and family night, that's super broad. Faith and family, you're just gonna combine those, but you're gonna have a specific gay pride or LGBTQ plus, whatever the new letters are added to it. They added letters. I know, and I can't remember them all. But you can go and you can celebrate that kind of stuff, but you can't go and say like, okay, tonight's a Christian family night, or tonight's a Muslim family night, or tonight's a Hindu family night, like Mormon family night. You know, like if you're gonna cancel that, or if you're not gonna be inclusive of everything, just don't do it at all. And I get why they do it. It's totally a money issue.
Yeah.
They do it because LGBTQ stuff brings in a lot of money, and it's a lot of awareness, and it's popular, right? The popular thing to do. Well, Black Lives Matter stuff is the popular thing to do right now. Before, that was the gay pride, and that's why the MLB is bringing in their Black Lives Matter stuff. And I feel like it's just a way, especially for baseball, to get popular again. Let's be honest, baseball numbers have declined a lot. And what are they going to do to fix it? They're going to have to be getting popular, saying popular thing. They got to be trendy, all that stuff. So, yeah, I mean, you can do what you want with your days, but it's like, it doesn't mean I have to support it. It doesn't mean I'm going to go. It doesn't mean that it's fair to everyone. Just don't be a hypocrite. Just let sports be sports.
Yeah. You don't have any room for that, really. There shouldn't be any room for it.
That's my thing. Like, why even have these days? Just take them out. Have everyone equal in their sport that they want to watch. Don't make it about anybody else but that one sport, and leave it there.
Mm-hmm. Cheer for your team.
Yeah. Cheer for your team. You know, go have fun with the fans. Relate with people that also like the team. People that you can connect to. Go and do your thing. It's not a time. You don't have to talk politics or bring that kind of stuff into sports for it to be enjoyable or for it to matter.
Yeah.
People like sports because politics doesn't matter in it. People hate politics in sports. I mean, think of the coach's kid. That's politics in sports. People hate it. I think, that's not something I like to see. So, thank you everyone for joining. Yep. Hope you liked this episode.
Yeah.
We definitely got into it a little bit. So
but it's still good.
I think so.
Yeah.
We'll find out what everybody else thinks. So
right.
Follow us on social media, Instagram, Twitter. Follow us on YouTube, Spotify, wherever you get your local podcasts. Thank you to our sponsors. We really appreciate it. Couldn't do it without you guys. And thank you for listening. We hope you enjoy. See you soon.